For this video, you are going to need your sketchbook, you're going to need a three-dimensional object, you're going to need a pencil and an eraser. I recommend not using a mechanical pencil, that way you can use like the side to shade in. What we're going to do is we are going to translate our learning, apply our learning from doing our value scales and our three-dimensional cube, cylinder, and sphere shaded in, and apply that now to a three-dimensional form of your choice. So go ahead and find an object that you feel like, I don't know, is interesting to you, something that you actually want to draw and shade in. The big thing is that it has depth to it. So you can see my scissors here. They have like a height or a length. We have a width. And we also have the depth. We have like how far it's sticking off of the surface of my sketchbook. You can see that I've sketched it out really lightly. When you're all done sketching it in your sketchbook, and I recommend life size, unless you have a very large object like, let's say, a basketball, a football, something like that, then you can definitely shrink it down a bit. But make sure there's enough room inside your drawing to create different values, right? We want to have different shades from dark, light, medium. Make sure that your lines are extremely light because you don't want any of those dark outlines to be showing. You can see that my scissors does not have a big black outline around it like a coloring book. So we don't want our drawing to have that either. So what you're going to do is you're going to, once you have it sketched out, lighten all your lines, and then you're going to find a place that you want to start. You can see with my scissors that there's like some different values that are happening because this material of plastic is different than this material. I also have the overall teal of the scissors, and then I have like the metallic of the blade. So you're going to want to understand that you have different values, or every material or every color in your object is going to be a different value. Also, the color itself or the material itself may have different values within it. So for example, I have this teal here, but as it wraps around the side, you can see that it gets a little bit darker. The teal right here, but as it wraps around the side, we get the shadow, it gets a little bit darker. Even the two blades of my scissors, you can see this one appears a little bit darker than that one, even though we know it's the same material. So when I'm talking about differences here, remember, we're talking about contrast. What's the difference between? How do you show that something is different? And when you have contrast in your value or shaded drawing, that's how you're going to make it look three-dimensional. So for example, I might decide that I want to start by shading up here. I'm working in those little ovals or those little circles, small areas at a time, and I'm starting to shade in, picking the value that I see. So basically you're pretending that you can only see black, whites, and grays. You can't see any color hues. If I look on my scissors from this surface to this surface, so from here to here, I notice that it's lighter here and darker down in here where the shadow is. So this value has to be lighter than where the shadow is. At the very, very edge, I start to see that starts to creep in a little bit of a shadow as it tilts away from my light source. So I can make that edge just a little bit darker as I come around. Following this, it gets a bit darker as it comes to the inside of the handle, and I'm just translating. I'm not worrying about color, I'm just thinking about, is it dark or light? As I wrap around this side, I get back to light again. Not quite white, but a light. And I can circle this back around. And as I start to tuck into here, I see that dark shadow wrapping around. More pressure, more layers to show the dark. And the light and the dark seem to meet about right there where the plastic of the handle twists. Now to the left, I can see that darker yet. Now this is where I'm talking about contrast. I don't have a big dark outline between this value and this one, but we can see that there's an edge, there's a difference. One's darker and one's lighter. You might notice that your object has areas like mine does right here, where it's like our first value scale, where you can see the difference between one value and another. And there might even be places that you might notice it fades. Like I can see that the value starts to fade as it moves up into this way. Continues to be dark along this edge. Go up and finish this part. So as you are working, you're looking for that contrast. I'll say that again, contrast is different. So wherever you've drawn a line, you need to ask yourself, is it darker on this side of the line or is it darker on this side of the line? You're always doing that comparing and contrast. In order for this to look three-dimensional, we need to have contrast. We need to have differences in the values that we're putting down. I can see a very high contrast ring that goes around this part of the scissors. I'll need to put that in and then go ahead and shade on the inside there. It's a little bit darker on this side, and you just continue to make your way around. Now I'm coming up on an edge between the teal plastic and the silver metallic, the metal. I notice that it gets a little bit dark here, right on the edge, and then it kind of fades back to lighter. Now I have to ask myself, does it look darker here or does it look darker here? If I squint at my scissors, it's difficult to tell. It almost looks like this part of the scissors and this part of the scissors are the same value. They're different colors, they're both the same darkness. I'm the artist here. I'm going to have to choose one as darker than the other. Otherwise, my viewers of this drawing are not going to be able to tell that the material changes. So I'm going to say that the scissors up here, I'm going to go ahead and say that this is going to be darker on the blade right up here. Notice the contrast. I can tell where the plastic ends and the blade begins because there's a different value. I didn't put a big dark outline around it. Now, just because it's darker up there doesn't mean I have to keep that blade of the scissors that dark all the way throughout. Notice how I'm making that dark value, stronger point pressure, more layers. As I work my way down, I notice that it stays fairly dark along the right-hand side of that blade, and it's just slightly lighter along the left-hand side of that blade. Another thing to notice is the two different blades in my scissors. We know that both of these are the same material. However, when we look at them, we can see that this one's slightly lighter than this one. So now that I've applied my dark value to here, I know that on this side I have to go at least one shade lighter to show that contrast. Bring this back over here. I'm going to continue to work on my drawing, and then I'll photograph it when it's finished and I'll attach it to this assignment. One last thing I want to mention is something called a grounding shadow. So you can see along the edge of my scissors, opposite of my light source, we can see a bit of a shadow. It's a bit deeper of a shadow here and a little bit more shallow here because this sticks up higher. Things that stick up higher are going to have a deeper shadow, and then things that are closer to like the surface of the ground are going to have a more shallow shadow. So when you go to do that shadow, you as the artist have to determine what's going to be darker, your object or the shadow. In my case right here, I'm going to try to make the shadow a little bit darker than the object so I can see that contrast. Really dark next to the object, and then I can pull that value out. See how I'm working in little ovals? And then I can pull that out to light. And I'll continue that down on the side.